Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in the Amsterdam Dialogue. I wish I could be there, but unfortunately I couldn't make it due to other commitments. Here today, I would like to talk about the conflict in Ukraine and its impact on the African continent, particularly as it pertains to peace and security. Since the beginning of the conflict on the 24th of February, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, President Moussa Faki Mahamat, and the chairperson of the African Union, His Excellency President Macky Sall of Senegal, have called for ceasefire and for dialogue to resolve the issues. On the 28th of February, they also issued another statement condemning the treatment of people of African origins who were trying to flee the continent and calling for humane treatment of African citizens. At the same time, we remain concerned about the impact this is having on the people of Ukraine and the suffering of many people, just like we also remain concerned about the suffering of people everywhere in the world. Here, I would like to highlight a few things, particularly as it pertains to the concern when it comes to security. First, we're concerned that the rising food and fuel prices might lead to social unrest in some of our member states if the conflict continues, which is why there is a lot of effort on the African continent to see how the African continent can help in ending the conflict and trying to facilitate a solution. To this end, the chairperson of the African Union, President Moussa Faki Mahamat, and the chair of the Union, President Macky Sall, will be traveling very soon to Russia and to Ukraine. There is also a concern about the return of military coup attempts, which might threaten the stability of our already fragile countries. The other concern that we have has to do with many young men and women who have actually enrolled in what they call the Ukraine Legion. The government of Algeria, Nigeria, and Senegal have already reacted in recent months when they saw that there were some young men who were trying to enroll. The same thing has happened actually for those enrolling to join the Russian side. We are also very much concerned about the proliferation of chemical and biological weapons, and our main concern is that if it were to fall into the wrong hands. We have seen other issues of concern is cyber attacks. As you know, many of our systems are actually linked to those of Europe, and we're concerned that actually this might also affect us. Let me, without going too much into the many security implications, there is one particular implication that most of us are concerned about. It has to do with funding for the African peace support operations on the continent. Although we remain optimistic and our partners continue to reassure us that these will not be affected, we have already started seeing a dwindling of funds, and most attention being to the conflict in Ukraine. Already, we are told that 1.5 billion euros have already been spent in the last 2 months. But there are also issues that we need to highlight, issues related to double standards. On the 19th of May, the US Congress actually approved a bill of $40 billion in assistance to Ukraine. Since 2007, we have been asking to have access to assess contributions within the UN Security Council, but it has not been made possible because of the conditionalities that were asked of us. I will give you the example of the African Union mission in Somalia, which its budget is 250 million euros a year, but we can't mobilize that money and we can't have access to assess contribution. Yet they are able in less than 2 months to mobilize funds worth $40 billion. We have also been asking for enablers and multipliers to confront with the terrorism on the continent, but we have not been able to mobilize enough helicopters for some of these missions and other enablers. But in less than 2 months, there are 16 helicopters which have already been provided in the war in Ukraine. There are 700 drones, and I can go on and on some of these issues, because these are important things to highlight. As it pertains to the Horn, there is, of course, the risk of food crisis. This is a region which was already faced with drought, and this is a major concern, and I know that many are working to attend to it, but this is a serious issue, and the Secretary General of the United Nations has already warned about this. There is also the repositioning of some of the global rivals trying to actually not only have access to ports in the region, but also to work to ensure that some of the transitions which are happening, that those who are emerging are aligned with their views. But all is not dark and gloom. I think that there is an opportunity for the African continent to work with the European continent and others. Number one, to try and look at how they can de-escalate the conflict in Ukraine. Number two, there is an opportunity for us, based on the lessons learned in our fight against COVID, to increase coordination and really create solidarity frameworks for, number one, to repatriate those African migrants who are stranded and in neighboring countries in Europe. Two, to try to see the countries who produce wheat, cereals, and those who produce oil and gas, to see how they can create solidarity frameworks where they can increase production and cushion those who are most vulnerable to this. The IMF tells us that the revenues on the African continent will be impacted because of low revenues with regards to tourism. We can launch a campaign to not only to attract Europeans but also others, and also intra-African trade. I think that the moment has come for us also to look into boosting the intra-African trade, and the moment is now more than ever, and I think that we'll be working on it. At the end of the day, the suffering of any human being, whether it's on the African continent or is in Europe, is a scar on our conscience. And I think that we should all thrive to see that this conflict ends, and that we get back to the values that actually allowed this world to make so much progress. The culture of the normalization of intolerance is no longer an option, and we should not be okay with it. I thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you all a successful deliberations. Thank you.